Hello, everyone. This is Dino Chris from Prehistoric Facts, and this is Prehistoric Facts Extra Episode number 94. This is my Walking with Beasts review. And so, um, a subscriber has actually commented that I have not reviewed this on any of my extra episodes. And so, I will do a review of Walking with Beasts. I got to watch it, I got to watch the whole entire thing. And so, and since this is actually from the early 2000s, I'll actually talk about like some things that are good about it, some things that are not quite great compared to, let's say, what modern paleontology documentaries are doing right now, and what the evidence is actually says about some of the animals that are being featured. Compared from then to now, and of course, talk about the crew that actually worked on this, and I'll give my overall thoughts at the end as well. So let's actually keep going here. And so, Walking with Beasts. So let's talk about the crew here. So narration, Kenneth Branagh. This is basically the British version. There is an American version. It was done by a female narrator, and yeah, from what I could tell, is that I don't think she was that memorable of a narrator, but because since the copy that I have of this uh, of this series was basically from the British version, and so producers are Tim Haynes, Jasper James, and Andrew Wilkes. Composer is Ben Bartlett, and he did the music for Walking with Dinosaurs. And so, good thing that his music is done really, really well for these two series. And it was done by the BBC, and this premiered back in 2001, fall of 2001. And so this series is almost 25 years old. So next year in 2026, it'll be 25 years old. So this is actually series that's considered to be very loved by many, and there's some things that do age pretty nicely in this, but there's also things that did not age well. And so let's actually go episode by episode, talk about each prehistoric animal that was featured in these episodes, and of course, I'll deliver my pros and cons for each episode. So the first episode is titled "New Dawn." Takes place 49 million years ago in the Eocene epoch, and this is the Messel Pit Quarry in Germany. And so this is mostly animals that have been found in the Messel Pit Quarry in Germany, so which is right near Frankfurt, Germany. So the animals that are featured here are Gastornis, Leptictidium, Propyliotherium, Ambulocetus, and Gaudinosha. And so let's talk about the pros here. Let's actually talk about each one of these animals. So Gastornis is a prehistoric bird. It's a prehistoric flightless bird. Leptictidium is an ancient type of mammal. It would look very similar to a shrew or a rodent, but it's an insectivorous type of animal. Propyliotherium is an early horse. Ambulocetus is an ancestor to whales, and it would swim like an otter, and would have webbed feet and all those sorts of things. But it's kind of misplaced here. I'll talk about that a little bit more in the cons. Gaudinosha is an early primate. It's mostly a nocturnal animal, and so on and so forth. But let's actually get to the pros here. Pros, I did like the design of Gastornis. I love the feathers, the colors of the feathers, how it was designed. The beak looked really nice. Um, and of course, the volcanic lake. The volcanic lake in this was actually a really nice touch, considering that the Messel Pit Quarry is basically a volcanic lake bed. It's basically a volcanic lake bed. And forested environment. I did like how the forest was actually presented in this episode. This was really, really well done. There were some good slow motion captions here, mainly like say the chase or like the Gastornis hunting and of course the nocturnal Gaudanosha. I loved how they did that. I think it was actually a really, really nice touch. And also the little like night vision type of thing that they did with the night scene. And this episode is basically a 24 hours, a whole entire day in this type of environment. But it's not every day, but it's basically just one entire day. It's basically just one entire day. The cons of this, Gastornis being a carnivore. What we now know of Gastornis is that Gastornis is more likely a herbivorous flightless bird. It's not a terror bird. It's not a carnivorous bird, even though back then it was thought to be like an ancestor to terror birds. But really, all it is a herbivorous type of bird because the beak is not designed to like be able to like tear apart meat or anything like that because there's no hook at the tip of the beak like most terror birds have, and so the carnivorous part is pretty dated. Shrink wrapping the ambulocetus, but the other predators that were around in here too, not Gastornis. But yeah, shrink wrapped ambulocetus, uh, and of course Leptictidium. The young of Leptictidium looked too much like the adults. Because if you're going to try to make young versions of this type of mammal, the noses should not be identical to the adults. The noses shouldn't be identical to the adults. They should probably be a bit shorter, and also the ears shouldn't be like as like say fully developed as like say the adults. And of course, teeth showing on the carnivores. This is a problem throughout the series. This is that the teeth are kind of showing in majority of the carnivorous mammals. This is kind of a problem because, like, I think it's because back then they probably were kind of like limited of what they could do, of like say with like lips and all that sorts of stuff. But yeah, but it's mostly due to shrink wrapping. Shrink wrapping is going to be a common con in this series. But let's actually continue on. So here is Gastornis of basically the what was shown in the episode, a carnivorous type of bird. But you look on the bottom left, you actually see that it looks more like a herbivorous type of bird. And so, yeah, this is what Gastornis actually is right now. Is this is herbivorous bird, not the carnivorous bird. Next episode is called Whale Killer. It takes place 36 million years in the Eocene as well, and it's mostly in the Tethys Sea and, of course, in Pakistan. And so the animals that were featured in this episode was Basilosaurus, Andrewsarchus, Embolotherium, Myritherium, Apitium, and Dorodon. And so Basilosaurus is a giant early whale. It's a giant early whale. Andrewsarchus is a carnivorous or possibly omnivorous um, type of predatory animal, but I'll get more into the concept of that. But Embolotherium is a type of brontothere, and you got like Myritherium, which is a distant relative of the elephant. You got Apitium, which is like an early version of monkeys. It was an early monkey, and then you got Dorodon, another early whale, another early whale. So the pros for this episode is the open areas, especially mainly in the land. The open areas, so not much forest. It's basically a little bit more of like a savanna type of open habitat where mammals got much bigger, and also that allows for the mammals to get bigger. Because when you're in a heavily forested environment, you're kind of actually not willing to get bigger because you're kind of constricted of what you can do and what you can be for size. Climate change. I love how they actually incorporated climate change in the story. how the ocean currents are changing, and how this is actually being a devastating effect, not just on land, but of course in the sea. How Basilosaurus has to survive uh, with a changing climate, and that is very, very well done in this episode. Mating Basilosaurus, I love the mating ritual that is actually being shown in this episode. Whale behavior, I love how the whale behavior is actually shown in this episode. Northern Africa, the Northern Africa part, so where like you get the scrub type of forest with this like tidal, with these like somewhat seafloor type of areas, and it's basically the ancestral environment of the Sahara Desert, and that's where majority of Basilosaurus fossils have been found. And of course, the survival bits in this episode, mainly in the Basilosaurus, and of course on land, especially with the Brontotheres and the Andrewsarchus. That was actually very, very well done in this episode. The cons of this episode: Andrewsarchus being wolf-like. So this is basically what Andrewsarchus really, really looked like back then. Today, Andrewsarchus has actually looked more like an entelodont. It looks more like an entelodont. And of course, there's only mostly what we know of Andrewsarchus is basically on one skull. Just basically one skull, and that was the skull that was found by Roy Chapman Andrews, and that's how Andrewsarchus was named after Roy Chapman Andrews. The weight of Basilosaurus, 60 tons. That is way too much. That was over exaggerated. Basilosaurus does not get that heavy. That is really, really pushing it. And then you actually see the sharks that were featured in this episode. These look like sharks that were copied from Walking with Dinosaurs, like the Hybotus designs. They look like they just basically copy and pasted them and just copied them and pasted them into Walking with Beasts. And we know Hybotus did not make it all the way to the Eocene. It did not make it all the way to the Eocene, and so that was a little bit of a con on this one. Blowholes. There is a couple of scenes where it looked like Basilosaurus and Dorodon were breathing like they had a blowhole. They did not have blowholes. They had actual nostrils. They had actual nostrils. They did not have blowholes because there's no evidence to support that they had blowholes. So that was a con in this one. And so yeah, this was a con on. There was many things wrong with this. There were some things that were wrong with this episode, but it looks like this was. You can definitely tell that the cons are starting getting less and less in some of the episodes. So let's actually get to episode 3. So episode 3 is called Land of Giants. It takes place 25 million years ago in the Oligocene epoch, and it takes place in Mongolia. And there were only 4 animals. I mean, there was technically 5, but there was 4 animals that were featured in this episode. You got Paraceratherium, even though they called it an Indragathera, but it's mainly Paraceratherium. Hyenodon, Entelodont, and of course Calicotherium. And so Paraceratherium is a really large relative of the rhinoceros. It's a large relative of the rhinoceros. It was basically like a rhino pretending to be a giraffe. That sort of thing. You got Hyenodon. I believe this was supposed to be Hyenodon gigas. Um, that was actually shown in this episode. Entelodon, so very like a hippo relative of the hippo type of animal, even though it said it was an ancestor to the pig. There's some truth to that, but not really anymore. And then you got Calicotherium, which is a distant relative of horses. It's a very bizarre animal. But anyway, the pros of this episode is that the Paraceratherium parental care. I loved how they actually incorporated the parental care of a female Paraceratherium to its calf, and that was a great story. That was a great storytelling tool right there. The wet and dry seasons that got featured in this. So the climate, very well done. The Entelodon battle, That was probably my favorite part of this episode. Was that the Intelodon battle where they were just biting each other, but it looked like one was just basically hanging on mostly to dear life of the other, and then you get to see the battle wounds of the loser in that episode. Hyenodon bite. I liked how Kenneth Branagh actually incorporated this episode actually incorporated how strong Hyenodon's bite really is. That was a very nice touch. Paraceratherium males battle. I like the battle of the males of the Paraceratherium. That was really cool. Just to see just whacking their heads against each other's bodies. That was very nicely done. Very good behavior being shown there. And I did like the ending of the episode, mainly due to the storytelling aspect of that. This is basically talking about the male Indrigathyr calf. Basically, like the first three, basically just talking about the 3 years of its early life. Just basically the 3 years. And so, like how it's saying that, like at the end of the episode, it actually has uh, found its own territory and is able to look after itself. That is actually really neat. Cons of this episode: shrink wrapping. There is a lot of shrink wrapping in this episode. I cannot fat. I just kind of this. It's a bit of an eyesore on this. The Hyenodon size. Hyenodon gigas does not get as big as a rhino. That is really outrageous. I believe what it was actually referring to is that there was probably some very large Hyenodon specimens, maybe Hyenodon gigas, and they thought and they paleontologists at the time probably thought that like, oh, this thing could possibly be as big as a rhino. But then in actuality, when they found more specimens, they actually realized that like, oh, it's not as big as a rhino. It's probably more likely the size of like say a lion or otherwise a Siberian tiger, sort of thing. That's probably what it should have been. There is a little bit of color issues, especially with the female Indrigathyr. There is some spots where you can definitely tell like the colors just did not mesh well. It seemed like there was some greens and some blues that were kind of mixed in there, and just kind of looked a little weird. Just kind of looked a little weird. I think some of this it does look like that the mother Indrigathyr or the Paraceratherium was not fully done. It looked like it was not fully done in terms of like the final touches. But hey, what can you do? What can you do when you actually have a time limit on that? Let's actually talk about the next episode. Next episode, episode 4, Next of Kin, takes place 3.4 or 3.2 million years ago in the Pliocene in Ethiopia. So we're starting to get to the anthropology type of stuff here, but there is some paleontology into this. There's only mostly 3 animals that are being shown here. I mean, there was mostly 4, but we're not going to talk about the 4th one because it wasn't featured too much. But it was mainly 3. And so we got Australopithecus, Dinotherium, and Dinofelis. So Australopithecus is a relative of humans. So the upright walking ancestors of humans. And then we got Dinotherium, which is a relative of the elephant, very large elephant relative. This thing would actually be nearly as tall as a giraffe, and it has kind of tusks, like basically on the chin of the animal, and kind of curving down and back, which is really neat. And then you got Dinofelis, which is a type of cat, uh, closer towards the saber-toothed variety. And then, so we actually talk about the pros here. Pros: social structure of Australopithecus. This was probably one of the best storytelling episodes. This is probably one of the best storytelling episodes because it just basically follows this clan, this tribe of Australopithecus. And even the Australopithecus have some names. They given names uh, to these like Australopithecus, so they kind of look like you were looking at characters, actual characters, in a story. And of course, one of the main Australopithecus characters in this story is Blue, a orphaned male Australopithecus, and it's a very sad story, but at least it kind of goes towards a happy ending, and that's actually a really nice storytelling aspect right there. The tool making, I liked how they actually incorporated tool making into Australopithecus. That was very nicely done. Australopithecus, not hunters but prey. That was a really nice, really nice plot point right there. Is that like yeah, Australopithecus were not predators. Our ancestors were not predators. They were actually prey, and so they have to watch out for big cats and some other types of predators. And so yeah, that was actually a really nice aspect to it. The omnivorous diet, but like they talk about like mostly the herbivorous diet of Australopithecus, like eating fruits, looking for roots. But they talked about like the scavenging aspect of Australopithecus, so talking about like meat eating, and so and then talked about how meat is a very small part of the diet of Australopithecus. Very good. And of course, the defense against Dinophilus, like throwing rocks at it and screaming at it, that was actually a very nicely done to be put into the story. Very nicely done. Now, the cons of this shrink wrapping, mainly due to Dinophilus and, of course, to Dinotherium. There's a little bit of shrink wrapping in Dinophilus, and also the CGI is really bad in this episode. This is really bad CGI. Like you can definitely tell that like this is probably like one of the last episodes to actually be edited, and it was just like not very well done. And like this is still kind of like 2000s CGI, early 2000s CGI, and so yeah, the CGI is pretty bad in this episode. The fifth episode, called Sabretooth, takes place 1 million years ago in the Pleistocene in Paraguay. And we have five animals that we're talking about here: Smilodon populator, Didicurus, Macrocania, Megatherium, and Force Raucus. Smilodon populator, the largest of all saber-toothed cats, uh, from South America, of course. Didicurus, a relative of the armadillo, and has like a very spiky club at the end of its tail. Macrocania, very weird looking, like deer-like creature, but it's not really a deer and it's not really antelope. It's just basically like its own type of thing in South America. Megatherium, a giant ground sloth, one of the biggest ground sloths, and of course, Force Raucus, the terror bird, type of terror bird that was from South America. Pros of this episode: the sexual dimorphism of Smilodon. I did like how they actually did incorporate like sexual dimorphism in this, like showing which ones are the females, which ones are the males. Like the males had a little bit more of a mane on them, whereas the females didn't have a mane. Um, Survival of Halftooth. This is basically the story of Halftooth and Halftooth's survival like story. That was really good, really good. Hunting for Smilodon, that was actually pretty decent. It was pretty decent. I'll give it a pro. Is that like it was pretty decently done. Not too bad. Cons of this episode is a little too much focus on the brothers in this episode. I think this was actually a little bit, even though if they were trying to focus on Halftooth, it just seemed like that they tried a little bit too. They kind of put too much emphasis on the brothers. Because like, yeah, I get it that you're trying to make it look like that, like, oh, you're right there, and you're actually trying to find Halftooth, and like, oh, Halftooth, we haven't seen him in a while, and like, let's just keep focusing on the brothers and the pride of the of these Smilodon tackling the prey. This was all. This was kind of really hard for me to actually like give it a pass because like how the Smilodon were tackling the Macrocenia was it was like it was trying to be like a like you're tackling the prey like a football player, like an American football player. That was kind of really odd. So I thought like it should have just used its claws. Should have just used its claws, like grab onto the prey and try to wrestle it down. It would have the strength to be able to tackle it down. And of course, there's shrink wrapping. There is definitely shrink wrapping on the Smilodon. The Smilodon are pretty much the worst when it comes to the shrink wrapping. This was probably one of the worst shrink wrapping out of a mammalian predator. And then I put in both pro and con for this one. The lion-like behavior for Smilodon populator. We don't know if they did actually live in prides or in groups. We don't know. Evidence does lean towards does lean towards like a family group structure or always a pride structure type of behavior, because we do see like healed wounds from Smilodon, mainly in Smilodon fatalis, and a little bit on Populator as well. Uh, but yeah, like we still don't know what the social structure of Smilodon really is. Did they behave like lions, or was it like something a little bit different? And the brothers, like the good things about the brothers was that like they made them look like they were slightly more muscular than Halftooth and stronger. Um, but the cons of that was they just made it look like that the brothers were tyrants. Like they tried to humanize them. Like that's kind of a little bit weird in my opinion, but like take what you get. But like this episode is not too bad. And then the final episode is episode 6, Mammoth Journey, and this takes place 30,000 years ago in the Pleistocene in northern Europe. And so the animals that we get to feature here is the woolly mammoth. That is the main focus animal. And then we got Megaloceros, a giant Irish elk, woolly rhino, Neanderthals, and Homo sapiens. And many of you know a lot of these animals already. Pros for this episode: majority of the designs of the mammals, these were very well done. This was probably the best episode in terms of like overall design, storytelling. It was just like probably they put a lot of focus on this episode because like people wanted to see this episode. I think it was probably like that episode that people really wanted to see. Actual actors for this one, they actually put actual actors for the human type of characters, and so like the Neanderthals, a lot of makeup and prosthetics, and then of course real human people too. So they did Homo sapiens and Neanderthals in this episode. Very nicely done, and the differences between them. And then you got the story of the herd, the main woolly mammoth herd. Very nicely done, well told story. The dangers of the ice age, not just like the bitter cold, but also like the animals that were around too. So like you talk about the predators, like humans, um, cave lions, hyenas, wolves, those sorts of things. Even the bugs, those were actually a danger to. Those were dangers in the ice age. And then you got and then the ending of this episode kind of shapes up for the next series, which is Walking with Cavemen. It did shape up that way, and so it was kind of like a oh, here's what we're cooking up next, but didn't really show like say, oh, we're gonna work on like we're gonna work on like say like here's like a Homo erectus or something like that. They didn't do that. It was just basically like here's what we're kind of teasing towards. We're teasing towards anthropology, so the study of humans and the human ancestors. Con of this episode is basically by one thing: the shrink wrapping of the cave lion. Cave lion looked really bad in this episode, and so yeah, that was not very good. But this was probably the best overall episode. And so here's a poster of Walking with Beasts, some of the animals that were featured here, so on and so forth. My overall thoughts. Narration is great. Kenneth Branagh does a nice job. He's such a great narrator, very underrated in terms of a narrator. And good thing he's coming back for Walking with Dinosaurs reboot this year. Music by Ben Bartlett, fantastic. Like the title, like music, he went hard on that. Like this was probably what like the title music was amazing. Probably like one of my favorite opening music scenes, opening types of music ever to like kick off an episode each time, and I just couldn't get enough of it. It was so good. Ben Bartlett went really hard for that, and some of the music is so good. Lots of shrink wrapping, mainly on the Predators. The Predators were the worst when it comes to shrink wrapping, and this was a big problem. CGI looked like it was from the early 2000s, so there's definitely scenes where you go like, it doesn't look right, and so at least some of the CGI today is a little bit better, and so we can kind of actually get the idea that like this does look like an eyesore. Best looking episode is the Mammoth Journey. Probably say that was probably, like I said before, this was probably the best episode out of all of the episodes in this series. Best one. And then you have good use of practical effects. There was definitely practical effects being used on there. There's some that did not look quite accurate to like the actual animals, but at least it was very nicely done to actually showcase some practical effects. Not quite as good as Walking with Dinosaurs, but at least it was a very solid sequel series. Very, very solid. My overall grade on this, I give it a 6.2 out of 10. It's solid. Like, you can still watch this. Like, you can watch it via streaming. I'm pretty sure Curiosity Stream has this, or wherever streaming service that does have it. And so you can watch it, and it's still fun. It's still fun to watch. Um, but at least you can get an idea of like it doesn't seem like it's was quite as good as wasn't quite as good as Walking with Dinosaurs. But I mean, some of you actually think this one is better than Walking with Dinosaurs. I mean, I probably say it's solid. I just say it's solid. I'd say it's solid. But what do you think of Walking with Beasts? Do you like it? Do you not like it, or you like me and somewhere in between? Like, it's solid. There's some good things, some bad things, but at least we can actually appreciate for what it is, But do you think Walking with Beasts should be rebooted like what Walking with Dinosaurs uh, is basically happening right now? Do you actually want this series to actually be rebooted? Do you want Walking with Beasts to be rebooted? And like, tell me, how many episodes do you want this series to be? Like, because I think doing episodes for Walking with Dinosaurs kind of feels to me like, yeah, you're staying true to the original, but of course, we want more. We want more. Like, don't just give us the Cretaceous. Like, give it a little bit more in the early Jurassic. Give more in, say, like middle Jurassic. Have more in the Triassic, because that's what I wanted. But it seems like we're not going to be in the Triassic for Walking with Dinosaurs reboot, so that's a shame. But yeah, you definitely see that like there's some like parts or like some epochs that are missing in Walking with Beasts. So like the Paleocene, Miocene, those were missing. So like, do you want the Pliocene and Miocene to be in a rebooted Walking with Beasts? Tell me in the comments. So the next episode will be on March 27th, 2025, and that'll be a Q&A episode. So if you got any questions about dinosaurs and other prehistoric life, feel free to email me at dinochrist71@gmail.com. Or go to my Facebook page, Prehistoric Facts of Dino Chris. Like the page, you to put your questions in the comment section. Please put them in the comment section. Don't put them on Messenger. Messengers are private conversations, so please put your questions in the comment section on any Facebook post. And also for YouTubers out there, like the video, subscribe to the channel. According to my analytics, a lot of you guys are checking out my channel not subscribed yet, so please feel free to hit that subscribe button. And also hit the like button, because that's how the YouTube algorithm works. The more likes the video gets, the more likely the video gets spread out to people that are interested in dinosaurs, prehistoric life, paleontology, and geology in general. So please feel free to do so. And also share the video, share the channel to anybody that is interested in dinosaurs, prehistoric life, paleontology, and geology in general. So please feel free to do so. And also hit that notification bell so that we can get weekly notifications of every video that comes out, and also some posts of polls that I actually have been doing. And so please check out the polls on the posts category, and you can actually interact with everybody in those polls, and also leave some comments in those polls too. I'd like to hear them. And also for YouTubers out there, leave your questions in the comment section, because I do read them all. Your questions do mean a lot on the Q&A episodes, so keep up the great work. And also make sure you keep your questions short to the point. You could also follow me on Instagram at dino.crestpf. I post pretty cool stuff on there. You could also follow me on Threads, same thing, at dino.crestpf. I post pretty cool stuff on there as well. Also, take care of people around you. Notice for your younger people out there, to make sure listening to your parents, your teachers, and your guardians is the best motivation you can have. A good education is very important. Have a good education. With a good education, you get a good job in the future. That's it for now. Now, see you guys next time.